What is going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q from Retro Q Gaming back at it as always, and here we are with episode 46 of our lovely little Quack experimental podcast. Coming up on the 1 year anniversary, approaching that 50 mark. Yes, because we did skip about 2 weeks, so we're going to be hitting that pretty soon. It's going to be interesting to take a quick look back at it and see where it is, 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 where it was, where it's going, where everything, yada, yada, yada. Now, until then, we'll talk this week and what's been going on this week. Not much to talk about. Usually I say that a lot of the time, maybe 50% of the time, but this time it really feels like, well, this will be over in about 15 minutes, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, let's do this. So, first up, I want to talk about something that has come back up lately, specifically this time with the Bayonetta and Vanquish remasters for the PS4 and Xbox One. Now, this is something that is not exclusive to these two games. It's been in arguably almost every single game since the advent of the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, and hell, even to an extent, some of the base consoles and, well, some of the a lot of the stuff on the Switch, but it's deceptive marketing. So again, we're going to use Bayonetta remastered and Vanquish remastered as the example here. Now, they are both advertised at being 4K 60 FPS and whatnot. Now, the big problem with that is these are not native 4K games, or at least as at the time of recording this anyway. I didn't care enough to watch the Vanquish one, but given the fact that it's a more demanding game than the likes of Bayonetta, yeah, I highly doubt it's going to be native 4K, because the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro versions, both of them, even the more powerful of the two, the Xbox One X, neither of these games are native 4K. They're both 1440p games on the enhanced consoles. They're both 1080p on the base ones, but yeah, they're not native 4K as advertised. And this is strange in several different ways. Now, of course, we know that the Xbox One X, while technically, yes, it is the most powerful console in the world that exists in the consumer space at the moment, it is still laughably bad, and it's still awfully low rent. And what really throws this into the weirdest light is if you run the Bayonetta PC port, which is a very, very high quality port, and is still the best version of the game, it runs really well on low-end hardware. For example, you can use either a factory overclocked or one you've overclocked yourself of the GTX 970, one of the, if not the, in my opinion at least anyway, the worst GPU ever created, and it can run it at native 4K and almost maintain 60 FPS. So, yeah, obviously you scale that back, you're getting somewhere, not to mention console level optimization and whatnot too. Now, this video isn't about the hardware in these boxes, because we all know it is laughably bad, but in effect, these are 10 years later, 10 years and another generation later, after the initial launch of the game, and it's trying to run a 10-year-old Xbox 360 game, which it still runs worse than the PC version, without any visual improvements and quality improvements in a massive note, just little smaller ones, slightly better textures, slightly better filtering, slightly better effects, slightly better shadows, this, that, and the other. But it almost seems like everything, or at least the majority of it, is just focused on the resolution and frame rate, and it fails to do these effectively. Now, I hate stuff like this. If you can't do something, don't try to finesse it, and don't market it as the bullshit that you're trying to do. I remember just before the Xbox One launched, not the Xbox One X, but the Xbox One launched, within maybe 6 to 8 months prior to launch, all Microsoft's emails, it's funny, if you were signed up for them or if you were part of Xbox Live back in the 360 era, you can probably go back and find these yourself, but they have marketing emails from 2013 where they say every game is going to be 60 FPS. Boy, that one fell apart, didn't it? Yeah. It's the same way with the PlayStation stuff as well. You might remember something I like to bring up all the time too, actually. Up to 1 week before Watch Dogs 1 launched on the PS4, Sony and Ubisoft were advertising on the official Sony forums, the official Sony blog, all official Sony channels, that Watch Dogs would be running at 1080-60 on the PS4, something it does not do. So they market it with all this bullshit, and they finesse ways around it, visual interpolation or resolution interpolation, and they have all this other crap, this checkerboard upscaling, just regular upscaling, putting it through all these different post-process pipelines. It's all a load of bullshit, but it really, to me, completely highlights that the entire existence of the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro being utterly, utterly useless. Because the benefits, I use that term very, very loosely, the benefits afforded to you over the base consoles are laughable at best. You might get a bit of a resolution bump. In one or two games, you might get a slight frame rate bump. But you're getting the same everything. The Division 2 is something that's a notable example. On Xbox One X, the Division 2 runs at native 4K. This is true. However, it can't even maintain 30 frames per second, which is half of the standard real frames per second. But it's hovering in the mid-20s. And not only does it hover in the mid-20s to run at native 4K, but it also has to use lower than the lowest quality settings to do so. Remember, the world's most powerful console has to run lower than lowest quality settings in many of the cases in order to hit 20-something FPS at native 4K. So it really just goes to show how the console makers, while releasing the Pro and the X, were saying, yeah, we know we're underpowered, but we're not really. But yeah, they were admitting it. But those consoles, which I own both, by the way, so I can't be playing favorites in that way, it's just an absolute mess. And hopefully they remember all of this going into next gen. This 4K, this 8K, this 60 FPS, this 120 FPS, this 240 FPS, whatever it is. All of this bullshit that they lie about with their crappy marketing and whatnot too. All of this needs to go away for next generation. All of it, completely, in every single way. Now, this will all tie into something we're going to talk about in another topic later in this video. But just before we round out this little segment, I do want to mention one other thing that factors into deceptive marketing that also needs to fuck off and die. In two ways. But, number one, or I guess number two, and then subsequently number three, timed exclusivity. Companies need to not be able to hide timed exclusivity. Every single game that has purchased or agreed upon or some type of contractual way to be a timed exclusive needs to be made public. Why, how, or at least, on the very, very least, tell us when the timed exclusivity is going to run out and what other platforms it's going to launch on. Because this is just absolute pure bullshit. I'm going to use one of the more notable examples that's coming very, very soon is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is a 1-year timed exclusive on PS4, which is a damn shame. But even though we know it's going to come out available on other platforms exactly 1 year after launch, we don't know what these other platforms are. Now, of course, chances are these platforms are just going to be Xbox One and Xbox One and PS4. Chances are these are going to be Xbox One and PC and maybe even Xbox and PS5. But the point is, we should have this information made available to us. They should be forced to say, yeah, it's timed exclusive for PS4 for 1 year, and then on April 5th, or whatever the date is, 2020, it will be released on PC, Xbox, and PS5, or whatever it is. And the big one to take away from all of this, the hiding timed exclusivity and whatnot too, is just fucking stop timed exclusivity completely. It's absolute bullshit. It's one of the worst practices in gaming and all, and it just needs to fuck off and die. Because it gimps the overall product. And one thing that ties in with this as well is when companies put out the bullshit statements to damage control their timed exclusivity thing. Let's use, again, Final Fantasy VII Remake for an example. And before anyone goes off with saying, oh, you're just a salty fanboy or a salty PC gamer or whatever, that you can't play Final Fantasy VII, well, guess what? I'm probably playing a better version of Final Fantasy VII than you, because I'm getting the Soldier First Class Edition, and I will be playing that on my PS4 Pro. So, yeah. And then, a year from now, I'll be playing it even better on my PC. But anyway, back to my point. All of this needs to fuck off and die and stop. That's it. It just needs to go away completely. Timed exclusivity, deceptive marketing, all of that bullshit. It's time to stop. But anyway, that's that one taken care of. But next up, we have something curious. Something that was kind of leaked, but then deleted, and then officially announced shortly later. Borderlands. Now, when I'm talking Borderlands, I'm talking a Borderlands live-action film. That's right. There's going to be a Borderlands live-action film. And this one officially now has a director. Now, this could, of course, go the way of the Uncharted film, which has lost like 6 directors before they've even started. But anyway, Eli Roth is supposedly, or well, is announced as the current director, at least anyway. Who knows, he might fall apart because, well, video game movies tend to do that a lot of the time. Although, I haven't seen Sonic, but I hear good things. Anyway, he is currently listed as the director for a live-action Borderlands film. Now, we don't know too much about it right now. There is one image posted out. Of course, it could just be a tongue-in-cheek promotional image where they superimposed Eli Roth's face onto a psycho's body, and they have some of the main characters in the background. Now, of course, we don't know if it's going to be about these characters, if they're going to be in it or whatnot too. But anyway, just so you get an idea of what Eli Roth's pedigree and history and how it would lend itself to maybe Borderlands. So we're looking at Cabin Fever, Hostel, Hostel Part 2, The Green Inferno, which I still need to watch, and the remake of Death Wish. There's also a couple of other things in there too. And if you've ever seen Inglourious Bastards, he's the Bear Jew. Yeah, not many people were probably expecting that. But overall, when you look at his style of film and the gory, over-the-top, grindhouse style of the likes of Cabin Fever, Hostel 1 and 2. Again, I haven't seen The Green Inferno, but I assume it would be kind of the same way. It's a zombie film, if I remember right. It makes me wonder how that kind of style and the way he does it is going to mesh with Borderlands and the style for there. It could potentially go really well. It almost feels like the two of them would fit together really well and kind of complement each other. And it almost feels like maybe potentially a perfect pick, and well, I think he might do a bit justice to it. However, you have to remember, if Eli Roth, depending on how much creative freedom he has, it might not be what you're expecting when you're going in thinking of Borderlands humor. You might go in and get, well, Hostel or Cabin Fever humor or something Tarantino-esque, because, well, him, Rodriguez, Tarantino, you can put them all in the same group and you get the slight semblance of what to expect. But of course, I'm here to ask the important questions because, well, we leave all that softball shit to the bloggers over at Social Justice Warrior Taku. But, yeah, here is what we all want to know. Who is going to play Mad Moxie? That's what we all really want to know. And that is the important one. But moving on to the next important one that we're going to talk about is Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, you might remember that a little while back I talked about GTA4 having been on Steam for, well, over a decade at this point. And its sudden removal from purchase. Of course, you could still play it and download it if you already owned it, but you could not purchase a new copy of it. Now, a couple of things were theorized at the time for this, with the likes of games for Windows Live or potential removal and moving exclusively to the Rockstar Gaming Launcher, or whatever they call it at this point. I can't even remember. But it turns out that it was pretty much just all to do with games for Windows Live, and it is coming back to Steam and the Rockstar Gaming Launcher at the same time on March 19th, so roughly about a month from the time of recording this video. Now, this time there will be one or two little different changes. It will be relaunched as a whole complete edition. If you already own the existing game and DLC, you will be automatically upgraded to the complete edition for free. There is the removal of games from Windows Live completely. However, that will mean that there is no online multiplayer or online leaderboards, because all of those were handled with games for Windows Live and whatnot too. Some of the radio stations are also missing. We have the likes of Ramjam FM, Self Actualization FM, and Vice City FM. So all of these will be removed from the game, or at least it says they're not going to be available right away. So maybe they're going to do it down the line or whatever. But of course, this is PC gaming. We will mod in these radio stations and whatnot too. Hell, we modded GTA4 to be playable, because it's an absolute disaster of a PC game designed back in the whole Windows Vista days. And, well, games from Windows Live didn't help it in that regard. And, yeah, GTA 4, not only did we make it playable, we also made it look better than GTA 5 in many aspects. So, naturally, a radio station or three isn't going to be a problem. Now, like I said, coming back March 19th, no word on the price yet, because it does include all the DLCs as a complete edition, and you will be, I hesitate to use the term upgraded, but you will be, yeah, let's call it upgraded, if you already own it. But, moving on away from GTA 4, we can look at GeForce Now. Of course, I've talked a couple of times about GeForce Now since its launch just a few weeks ago, and how it's basically, this is kind of out of context, I guess, but if streaming games and whatnot was forced upon you and it became the new norm, this would be the way to do it. It is the best version of streaming as it is at the moment, but the big problem with that is it's still the best of the worst. Now, it's supposedly significantly better than the worst, but it's still the whole point of the whole thing anyway. Now, you might remember that just recently it was announced, and I talked about it as well actually, that all Activision Blizzard games were removed from GeForce Now. Now, originally the whole question about that was, why were they removed such and such? Because they were on there originally. GeForce, or well, Nvidia and Activision Blizzard already had an agreement in place for the Activision Blizzard games to be part of GeForce Now while it was on in a beta early access trial version of it. Now, of course, the big problem there is with legalese and money and whatnot, and lawyers trying to get theirs. Once it went into full access and full release, it turned out that those contracts, at least to Activision Blizzard, were no longer valid, that they were only valid to the early access non-complete beta version of it. So they got all their games pulled. I'm sure they're working on a way around it where they can relicense the stuff to add it to it again and go from there and get them back on it. But it turns out that someone else has taken note of this, and they're probably trying to get some more money out of it too. But there's also potentially one other option that could be behind all of this anyway. But we have Bethesda. So now all Bethesda Softworks games, except Wolfenstein Youngblood, strangely enough, then again that is the most recent one, so maybe that has maybe it's built into the contract on that one. But all the Bethesda Softworks games, excluding Wolfenstein Youngblood, have been removed too. Now, this one wasn't explicitly stated for the same reason as Activision Blizzard. So they haven't went out and said, yep, we had a temporary beta agreement in place that doesn't apply to the full one. So maybe they're trying to pull an Activision Blizzard and just pull them off to try get more money and try renegotiate a contract and whatnot too. But there's also one other option that it could be. Many people forget this, but Bethesda actually are working on their own cloud gaming streaming service. So maybe they want to get all their own stuff on there. However, that begs the old question. Why the hell is Wolfenstein Youngblood, of all games, and the only game, the exception to this rule, or omitted from this whole thing? It's very, very strange. We'll have to wait and see if they come back. We'll have to wait and see when, why, or what the reason is given. But we just don't know yet. And to be honest, it's not really important. Game streaming and all that. But moving on to something that's almost as bad as streaming, or potentially worse, depending on what way you look at it and the situation surrounding it, but we have DRM. Now, of course, Everyone knows that I'm a massive proponent of physical media and actually owning my games and playing them whenever I want and not playing them whenever losing access to them and whatnot and not giving that control to a company. I feel fairly smug about all of this lately, mainly because for the last, hell, it's probably even been months at this point. It feels like every day, maybe every second day, when I look at Twitter, it feels like almost every day that companies, publishers, developers, whoever it is, although a lot of the time it's just really Microsoft, although you do see it from others too, but most of the time it's from Microsoft and Xbox, where there's some type of server issue or some glitch or some type of problem anyway, some coding or library or database or whatever it is, and you can't play certain games. Now, I don't mean the servers go down and you can't play these certain games online or anything like that. But you can't even boot these games up and play them at all. The license key itself and the one that shows that your account is licensed to boot this game up is just fucked. And this just, I mean, what's the deal? This is crazy, because it's because of stuff like this. I have this big game collection. It's one of the main reasons. I like to be able to decide when I can and can't play a game. I don't want to be at the whim of a server or be at the mercy of a company and a corporation that could potentially just turn all this crap off, because let's face it, that could be a very real possibility given some of this stuff. But because of a bug or a glitch or whatever it is, I can't play a game that I bought, a game that was potentially working earlier the same day or the previous day, that is not online or does not have online components. This is madness. This is ludicrous. Why is everyone defending this? And now you see why I love physical media as much as I do. It's all this DRM, digital rights management bullshit. This is why I do not like digital only copies of games. It's complete ludicrousness. Because why would you why would you willingly hand over that type of control to a company? I just don't know. I just don't get it. But here we are already with our last proper topic. Of course, we still have one more segment, everyone's favorite one to go after this. But this is the one that I talked about earlier when I was talking about, say, deceptive marketing and whatnot, and how it would tie into something we were going to talk about. And that is next-gen performance. Now, you see a lot of stuff out there with next-gen performance and what they're going to talk about, what they're aiming for, what they're bragging about, yada, yada, yada. We've been through this before, so chances are it's not going to be quite what they're claiming to deliver. But I hope that even to some degree, I hope it's right and I hope it's accurate. Now, not just because, 60 FPS is obviously more important, higher is even better, and yeah, console gamers claiming this, that, and the other. Specifically fanboys, I should say. I'd clarify that one. Fanboys are, being fanboys about the whole situation. But the main reason that I want all of the marketing to reflect what it actually is, the frame rate, the resolution, whatever, being real, and native resolution, of course, is one of the more important ones, especially after throwing out such crazy numbers like 4K, 240 FPS, 8K, stuff like this. It's very, very questionable when they do stuff like this. But I hope it's alright, simply because, actually, you know what, let me pull that back a bit. Let me change what I'm going to say a bit. Not because it will give better experiences overall, not because the development floor will be low or will be higher up and the development ceiling will be higher up, which of course gives me, as a PC gamer, the best possible experience over the consoles. But no, those are added extra benefit reasons. But it's so I can say, I told you so. That 60 FPS is more important. While everyone was lying to themselves, everyone was lying to everyone else, and they were just deluding themselves because they were probably too stupid to put a PC together. That's the easy way. It was probably done. They were drinking the Kool-Aid, damage controlling, corporate slaving, shilling for the companies for 2 generations. Assuming that is the 8th generation of consoles, and of course the 7th generation of consoles. Because, surprise, surprise, up until the 6th generation of consoles, 60 FPS was usually the developed standard. That's why it's been like that for 20 plus years. But again, it changed for console gamers. Strange. And then, of course, it suddenly didn't become a problem when games were running at half the speed, one third of the speed, a quarter of the speed, and being significantly less responsive. So, yeah. The main thing I look forward to is saying I told you so. Now, how can I transition from that to the best segment? Because that almost feels like the best segment. But, well, we'll do it anyway. The reason why everyone's here, so everyone can ask you, what is up? What's going down? What's the deal? What's the 411? What is going on? What are you playing? Well, I haven't been playing much this week, as usual, because I've been sticking to it when I've been saying that I'm just going to try play 1-2 specific things. Focus on something, just go deal with that as it is. So I did kind of break that ever so slightly, because the other night I did get a late night email and access to the Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Master Chief Collection beta version on PC. Got a chance to play some of that. There's only 4 campaign missions included. I got to play almost all of them so far. And oh my god, is it fantastic. I cannot wait until that game comes out. I am going to absolutely destroy that. I'm going to completely destroy that like it's some fine imported booty. It's going to be it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be long, it's going to be strong, it's going to be all night long, because that is how I cue it. But anyway, other than that, the big one I've been focusing on, well, Tales of Zestiria. I finally got around to playing it. I started it once way back on the PS4 when it first came out, and I didn't get a chance to put too much time into it. I only got maybe 2 or 3 hours in and then stopped. Now, this time, luckily, I'm maybe 6, 8, even 10 hours in. I've gotten further than I ever did on the PS4 version. However, I do have a couple of gripes. The combat and controls are questionable at best. Some of the systems are not really great. It is one of the weaker Tales of games, which is, depending on what way you want to look at it, it could be fair or unfair criticism, because most of the Tales of series are fantastic, and saying that it's one of the weakest ones would usually imply that it's still a really good game. But no, this is like, the game is average so far, at least anyway. The game is average, maybe a 5 out of 10, maybe a 6, between a 4 and a 6 out of 10. It's an average game. It's not great, if you will. I'm still going to play it. I'm hoping to finish it eventually, because, well, I still got about a month before the next big game with Doom Eternal comes out. But yeah, that's the big one I'm going with. Then I'm going to break it up, do something else, whatever it is. Maybe play some Doom Eternal, some Animal Crossing, whatever it is. And then we'll see what comes next. Could I stomach going straight into Tales of Zestiria is what I'm playing. Tales of Berseria as my next one. Or, like, I have my PS2 set up beside me here, connected into my PVM with my RGB SCART cable. Maybe I play Wild Arms 3. Because Tales of Zestiria and Wild Arms 3 were a 50-50 choice. That's why I set up the PS2 with the intention of actually playing Wild Arms. And then at the last second, no, I switched to Zestiria. So we'll have to see how that one goes in the meantime. Of course, there's a bunch of other stuff I want to play after that, peppered in with some new releases, some old stuff as well. And it's going to be fun times. Of course, by that time, we're looking at March and April. We've got stuff like Doom Eternal. I've got the TurboGrafx Mini, Animal Crossing, Resident Evil 3. I've got the likes of potentially Borderlands 3. What else is there? Of course, there's a big one I'm forgetting, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and a couple of other games in there too. So it's going to be a booked couple of months, if you will. But it's going to be a fun one. That's the important thing. Anyway, in the meantime, that is it. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with me through this probably, hopefully, shorter episode anyway. But, of course, in the meantime, let me know in the comments section below. Thoughts, opinions, feelings, butthurt, whatever it is. Reinforcement of your same opinions in the comments section below of any of these segments. And, of course, hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video, and while you're at it, why not head on over and hit the subscribe button and even ring the little notification bell. That way, of course, you can be one of the first people who gets notified of this glorious little podcast episode every weekend when we do eventually get around to uploading them, because, well, they're just so right and so high quality. Why would you not want to? But of course, in the meantime, remember, thank you for watching, and winners don't play switchboards.